Hey everybody, welcome back to Engaging the Phenomenon. This video is going to be a compilation of many of the times that the meeting with Vice Admiral Wilson occurred with Dr. Greer, Ed Mitchell, Dr. Stephen Greer, and others in the Pentagon regarding everything that is actually mentioned and referred to in the Wilson Davis Memo, and this serves as a good course of history and context of that meeting and its results. This compilation, in large part, was helped due to a great resource website that was put together, a kind of history of this entire saga, if you want to call it that. This actually pretty incredible meeting that occurred, and that was heavily researched by Giuliano Marinkovic, and he has a website here I'm going to link in the description that has all these video resources and much more, including articles going back many years up until just now. Actually, there's news coming up on this issue all the time at this point, with the revelation of the Wilson Davis notes, and it's become a pretty hot topic again recently. It's an important story in current UFO history, especially regarding crash retrievals and secret government / contractor special access programs and unacknowledged special access programs, USAPs, that deal with this subject in a very deep and secretive way. And if true, and there's more coming out on this on a daily basis now, is one of the most incredible stories in modern day and mankind. This is an incredible topic of discussion. And it seems, given everything and all the resources we have, that there is some truth to it. Now, the big issue is trying to discover what the objective or absolute truth of all this is. But again, these are just some clips and resources regarding the initial meeting that happened in '97. The letter or document I was able to find back a few 2 weeks ago or so, where Commander Will Miller was addressing Admiral Tom Wilson in 1995, saying that he wanted to basically brief him on all these UFO related subjects, including Dr. Greer's work early in the CSETI days. And this is 1995 that Commander Will Miller is talking to Admiral Tom Wilson about this, when we know from years ago and recently, Admiral or Vice Admiral Tom Wilson, now retired, responded to reporter Billy Cox by saying that he had no interest in the UFO subject and that he didn't have involvement and he didn't follow up on it. Now, regarding current developments, that seems not to be the case, but at least in this 95 letter or document, you can tell that Wilson had been aware of this issue and had at least been told about these issues for several years before this 97 meeting occurred. So that is highly significant. In a lecture where I found the letter from Commander Miller to Wilson, Dr. Greer has mentioned that before this meeting in '97, that Admiral Wilson had helped them in several ways before the meeting even occurred. Now, I don't know what that means. I'm trying to find out, because that would be a pretty huge development if that ends up being true. And I encourage everybody to try to find out exactly what that means. I'm trying to find out through my sources what that means. And again, now we have Bob McGuire, who had been part of the intelligence community, and he has a history working in the field with Pentagon and DoD via contract work, to my understanding. And he actually saw a letter from Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson, who, Thomas Wilson went on to be the director of the DIA subsequently, so he moved upwards. But in a letter from 2004, 2005, I believe, where Tom Wilson was writing a letter to somebody who Bob McGuire knew, and in this letter, it described the results of the meeting where Tom Wilson did inquire about these, UFO unacknowledged special access programs, was denied access and oversight of them when they were allegedly, supposed to be under his command, to his understanding, but they were not. And the letter that Bob McGuire had seen is another data point of evidence that shows that the meeting did occur with Dr. Greer, Ed Mitchell, Commander Miller, and a few others, with Thomas Wilson in 97, and that he did look into these programs and was denied access. So it really validates that in the entire story of what occurred there. So that's enough on that for now, but just for context, I'll add that in. But again, this is a video compilation of Dr. Ed Mitchell, Dr. Greer, and Commander Miller, all kind of sharing from their perspective what occurred regarding this meeting with Tom Wilson, 97.
Well, I eventually went to the Pentagon and asked for a meeting with the Intelligence Committee of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which I got with another naval officer who had had many similar experiences. And we told our story, and this gentleman, a Vice Admiral, said to us, well, I don't know about that, but I'm going to find out. And called a few weeks later and said he had found the source of the black budget funding for this project, and that he was going to subsequently investigate, because if it was real, he should know about it. As a matter of fact, he should be in charge. That was his words. And so we did get calls from him sometime later, and a report much later than that, that he had found the people responsible for the cover-up and for the people who were in the know. And we're told, I'm sorry, Admiral, you do not have need to know here, and so goodbye. And in addition to that, I was briefed at our Pentagon, because I'd asked some questions there a few years ago, and was briefed a high-level officer on what I knew, and he said, well, I don't know about that, but I will find out. In 1997, I was in Washington, and it was a disclosure conference. Went to the Pentagon. We asked for a meeting with the Intelligence Committee in the Pentagon. The Vice Admiral that we met with said, well, I don't know about that. And he said, I'll find out. Subsequently called and said, you were right. That program is there and did happen. I'm going to see if I can get into it. And we got information later that he did find the people responsible for doing the current work, but was resoundingly told that he had no need to know, therefore he couldn't come in.
But why?
In this disclosure movement. And at some point, about 10 years ago, and I can't remember what date it was right now, when the disclosure movement was going strongly, I came here to Washington with a Navy commander by the name of Will Miller and Dr. Stephen Greer, and we were able to get an appointment at the Pentagon to talk about what we knew, or what we allegedly knew, what we thought we knew, and went and told our story. And the powers that be at the Intelligence Committee of the Joint Chiefs of Staff listened to our story and said, the Admiral said, Well, I don't know that story. I don't know that that's true, but I will find out. So we departed, went on our way, and subsequently learned through Dr. Greer and through Will Miller and that those stories had been confirmed and that the Admiral had been denied access when he tried to get into the inner workings of that process. And we had confirmation of that, although that Admiral now denies the fact that this is the fact. So my story is essentially that.
The day after that event, I went straight to the Pentagon and did a briefing, what's called a stand-up briefing for J2, the head of intelligence for Joint Chiefs, a different one from the one who forced the meeting at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And this Admiral Tom Wilson hosted us at the Pentagon in the E ring, where all the admirals and generals are, the outer ring, because they get the views. So the inner ring can't see anything. And I went there with astronaut Edgar Mitchell, myself, a couple of the Disclosure Project witnesses, and my assistant, Sherry Adamak. And what was fascinating is that before I went, I had my military advisor send to the Admiral a document I had received. And it's the first top secret document in the briefing for the President that I did for Obama, which we'll get to in a little bit. And this is dated from the 90s, and it's from Nellis Air Force Base, what people call mistakenly Area 51. It's not the proper name. And this document actually was a security alert because there were some UFO spotters who had penetrated the perimeter of Nellis, and they were going to have to shut down operations with their EMGs, their electromagnetic anti-gravity test flights in that range that they have built. And the list is fascinating for the names of the compartments. And I just want to share a few of them just because, and this is dated 28 July 1991, 0900 hours. And it's from the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, which is the super secret spy satellite operations part of the Air Force originally. So it went to Commander's Net, Royal Ops, Cosmic Ops, that is a clearance. These are all compartmented operations. MAJ, M-A-J, Ops, Magi Ops, COMINT, COMSEC, ELINT, Human Intelligence Ops, AFOSI, Nellis, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and then a whole bunch of different numbered compartments. Red Flag, Dart East, Dart South, Pahut Mesa Military Operating Center, Sally Corridor, key one, Groom Lake, MOC, Dreamland, MOC, Blackjack Team. Blackjack control is at Edwards, by the way. The control is at Edwards, but there was a team at Nellis. Acrotect, Sea Spray, etc. So one of these compartments was known by Admiral Tom Wilson. I don't know which one. But it was being operated through a contractor. All the important stuff is done by corporate, by the way. If it's key, it's corporate. Lockheed Martin, EG&G, E-Systems, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Booz Allen Hamilton, on and on. Edward Snowden, by the way, worked for Booz Allen Hamilton, who contracts for the National Security Agency. So the corporate world is actually where most of the USAPs get centered. And then they interface with these USAPs within military and intelligence, like this. And if you approach it from the government, they say, well, it doesn't exist. And you approach it from a corporate, it's privatized. It's a corporate secret, like Microsoft's code. Got it? It's hermetically sealed away from everyone between those two techniques. Very clever, very illegal, very clever. But the mafia is always very clever. And this is the biggest mafia in the world. So when Admiral Wilson recognized one of these compartments, he contacted them. Now this is prior to me and Edgar Mitchell and other people arriving at the Pentagon in the spring of 1997. And he picked up the phone and he said, this is Admiral Wilson. I'm head of intelligence joint staff, J2. I'd like to be read into, which means briefed. I want to be read into this project, blah. And they say, yes, sir, we know who you are, but you don't have a need to know. And he said, God damn it, I'm the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. How can I not have a need to know? And they said, sir, we cannot discuss this with you, and we will not. Click, hung up on him, blocked his line, would not receive any further calls from. This is an admiral in charge of intelligence assessments and putting intelligence together for the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Pentagon of the United States. Now this I know for a personal fact. So now you have a coup d'etat that extends to even the highest levels of the Pentagon. So by the time I walked through the door to do what was supposed to be a 45-minute stand-up briefing for the admiral and his staff, he was so scared and so mad, he was scared. And the meeting went for 2 hours, and if Edgar Mitchell hadn't had to leave to go to an interview in New York City on some TV show, it would have gone on for 3 or 4 hours. He kept canceling his other appointments. At the end of that briefing, I said, we really need your help. And he said, well, what can I do? They're not going to tell me anything. The best thing I have in my arsenal is the B-2 stealth bomber that I know about. And you're telling me that there are unacknowledged projects that have things that can go trans-dimensional light speed and beyond, that can do circles around my B-2 stealth. He says, it's point, set, and match. I said, well, you still need to help us get control of it. He says, how can I do that without having the Secretary of Defense or the President order me to, without myself doing something rogue? See, here's the good guys are trapped by being good. I said, here's the thing. The only thing bad about nice people is that they're nice. And the people who are rapacious criminals are not nice, and they don't give a damn about the law or people's lives, and they don't mind killing you. So he said, I can't do this. And then he said, well, who else have you met with? I said, well, the CIA director, and I started naming all these people. So he says, well, you know, if those folks are being Schmidt-canned, pushed aside, what am I supposed to do? So he basically threw up his hands. He says, I don't see that I can do anything.
I was pleased to be able to set up a meeting at the Joint Staff there, J2, the Director for Intelligence, back in 97.
Yeah, and what Commander Miller is referring to is the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, although they call it Joint Staff, right, at the Pentagon.
Right. Yeah, and that was a meeting with you and me, and I think Ed Mitchell was there,
right.
astronaut Ed Mitchell, among others. And the Admiral took this briefing with the same level of gravity and interest as he would any other national security, national intelligence matter. So when folks say that the military is not interested in this subject, that is obviously not the case and has not been our experience.
No, and in fact, I remember that we were slotted for a certain amount of time, and he kept turning to his aide saying, cancel this, cancel. It kept extending because he had tremendous interest in what was being shared.
Yes. It was also a little interesting aside. As I was leaving, the Admiral's aide turned to me and said, you know, the subject of Majestic MJ-12 came up, and there's been a lot of debate as to, you know, whether that's real, whether it ever existed. And he said, you know, we know it exists. We here at the Intelligence Directorate for the Joint Staff just don't have the need to know what they do. Right. And I found that to be a very interesting statement.
A very important statement, and of course, if you look at this National Reconnaissance Office I have from the early 90s, it lists specifically MAGIC, M-A-J-I-C, and Cosmic Ops, and various code numbers and code names on this document, and
we know it's a legitimate document, and so it was basically warning of a security breach at the Nellis Air Force Range out Pahood Mesa, S12, S4, S3, Groom Lake, where a lot of very classified research and development and aerospace activities take place related to all of this. I mean, the public has incorrectly called it in Area 51, but nobody calls it that. Who's in the know? But the point being that this document actually has that on the distribution for this alert for a security breach out at that range, and Magic was one of them. So.
Right.